The desert doesn't lie. It has no use for pretty words or comfortable stories. When the sun comes down hard on the red clay of New Mexico, everything that was ever soft burns away until all that's left is bone, dust, and the truth a man has been avoiding for years. Ethan Carter stood at the fence of his ranch, watching the last of his cattle disappear behind the ridge. He didn't chase them. He hadn't chased anything in a long time. He was 41 years old. He had a roof, a mule, enough dried beans to last the winter, and a silence so thick it pressed against him like a second skin. There had been a woman once, Margaret. There had been a dream of children, a boy who would carry his name, a girl who would laugh the way her mother laughed. There had been a future. Then the fever came through the valley like a whisper turned scream. Margaret was gone before the cottonwood bloomed. The children who never were became the children who would never be. And Ethan buried the dream right next to her in the red dirt east of the old oak. That was 7 years ago. Since then, the ranch had grown quieter and the man had grown harder. And everyone in Rio Blanco County had quietly decided that Ethan Carter was the kind of man who was done with living, even if he hadn't gotten around to dying yet. He was pulling water from the well that morning when he heard hooves on the road. He didn't look up at first. Nobody came out this far without reason, and reason, in his experience, was rarely welcome. But the hooves stopped at his gate. And then a voice, low, careful, unmistakably young, said the 6 words that would change the rest of his life. "My father said you wanted children." Ethan looked up slowly, the way a man does when he's learned not to trust sudden things. She was young, 19, maybe 20, standing on the other side of the gate with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm, but from long practice with danger. Apache clearly. Her hair was black and long, her clothing a mix of worn cotton and deerskin. She carried a battered leather satchel over one shoulder and a rolled blanket under her arm. Her boots were cracked at the seams. She was looking at him the way you look at something you're not sure will hurt you. He came to the gate. He didn't open it. "Who's your father?" He said she corrected. "He died 3 months ago. His name was Kayleigh." She paused. "You knew him as Charlie." Charlie. Ethan felt the name land somewhere old inside him. Charlie Running Horse. 12 years ago, before the dream and the fever and all of it, Ethan had ridden with Charlie for 2 seasons, driving cattle up through Arizona, sleeping under the same stars, splitting the last of the coffee. He hadn't seen him since. "Charlie's dead," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment, the satchel, the cracked boots, the careful eyes. "He sent you here before he died," he said. She hesitated, then said it straight, the way she had been practicing it on the road. "He said you always wanted children, but you gave up on the idea. He said you were a good man and a stubborn one. He told me you would probably tell me to go away." "He wasn't wrong," Ethan said. "He also said," she continued without blinking, "that if you said that, I should tell you that a man who stops wanting things is a man who stops living, and that you owed him a debt." "What kind of debt?" Ethan asked slowly. She opened the satchel and pulled out a folded letter. "The kind you can only repay with time," she said. He read the letter at the kitchen table while she stood just inside the door, not quite in the room and not quite out of it. Charlie's handwriting was uneven and slow, the handwriting of a man who learned to write late and never trusted it fully. But the words were clear. "Ethan, if you're reading this, my girl made it. Her name is Ayanna. It means eternal bloom. Her mother named her before she left us. Ayanna is good and strong and too smart for her own safety, and she has nowhere to go. Her people won't take her back. She is too much her father's daughter, too much between worlds. The white towns won't keep her without a husband or a position, and both of those are just different kinds of cages. I thought of you because I know you are honest, and because I know you are alone. I am not asking you to love her like a daughter. I am asking you to give her a season, work, shelter, the chance to find her own way. After that, if she wants to go, let her go. If she wants to stay, let her choose. You told me once, sitting east of the Brazos, that you wished you'd had a family. I told you it wasn't too late. You said it was. I'm asking you one last time, from wherever I am now. Prove me right. Ethan folded the letter. He looked at Ayanna, who had not moved from the doorway. I have no right to do this, Ethan said quietly. No, she agreed. He didn't. I'm not looking for. I know what you're not looking for, she said. There was no anger in her voice, only patient precision. I'm not looking for a father or a husband or charity. I'm looking for one season of work for honest pay. That's all. Ethan looked at the folded letter in his hands. Outside, the wind moved through the dry grass with a long, low sound like a question. He stood up slowly. There's a cot in the back room, he said. Supper's at sundown. He walked toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. One thing, he said without turning around. I don't talk about Margaret. Not to anyone. Not ever. A pause. I just need you to know that. He went outside. Ayanna looked at the folded letter still on the table, the letter that hadn't mentioned any Margaret at all, and understood for the first time exactly how much this man was carrying. The first 2 weeks were built entirely of silence and distance and small practical things. Ayanna woke before dawn without being asked. She mended the fence along the south pasture, not the patching Ethan had been doing for years, but a real repair, post by post, until the line was clean and true. She learned the well's temperament, the way the rope stuck on cold mornings, the way the bucket had to be angled, and fixed both. She cooked in the evenings, corn and dried meat, and occasionally something she'd found in the hills that Ethan didn't recognize but ate anyway because it was good. He watched her the way you watch weather carefully from a distance, waiting to see what kind of storm she'd turn out to be. But she wasn't a storm. She was the opposite, the kind of stillness that follows one. They didn't talk much. He asked about the work, she answered in facts. She asked about the land, he answered in facts. They built a functional piece out of the exchange of information, and neither of them reached past it. On the 15th day, Ethan was repairing the barn roof when the ladder slipped. He caught the edge of a beam on the way down, enough to slow the fall but not stop it. He hit the ground hard on his left side and lay there looking at the sky while his body decided whether anything was broken. Ayanna appeared in his field of vision, crouching beside him. Can you move your fingers? She asked. He could. Your feet? Yes. Then you're not broken. She stayed where she was. You're also not as careful as you think you are. He almost laughed. He stopped himself. I've been doing this alone for 7 years, he said. I know, she said. That's the problem. She helped him up. He pulled his hand back. She didn't react. But for the rest of that afternoon, he found himself noticing exactly where she was in the room. That night at supper, neither of them spoke about it, but the silence had changed shape, and both of them knew it. It started with a fire, a contained one, built low in the ring of stones east of the house. He'd been sitting with it for an hour before he heard her footsteps behind him. He didn't tell her to go back. She didn't ask permission. She sat on the far side of the fire and looked up at the sky the way her father had taught her, not searching, just receiving. After a long time, she said, he used to say the stars were the campfires of everyone who went before us. Charlie, Ethan said. Yes. Ethan looked up. The Milky Way cut across the black sky in its ancient, careless arc. He had sat under it 1,000 times without feeling anything. Tonight, for the first time in longer than he could say, he felt something. He talked about you, she said. He said you were the only white man he ever trusted with his back. He said you were fair and steady and you didn't pretend the world was something it wasn't. He was generous. He was accurate, she said. And the way she said it, not like flattery but like a finding, made him look across the fire at her. She was watching him without self-consciousness, the way a person watches something they are trying to understand rather than impress. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "After the season, where will you go?" She was quiet for a while. "I don't know," she said finally. "I used to think I knew. After my father got sick, the knowing went away." She paused. "I think I'm looking for somewhere that feels like it could be mine." Ethan looked back at the fire. He said nothing, but something in his chest moved like a gate unlatched by wind, not by hand. That night, for the first time in 7 years, he left the fire burning a little longer than necessary. They rode into town together on the 1st of the month. Supplies needed, no way around it. Ethan had been dreading it. Rio Blanco was not a generous town. It measured people carefully and found most of them wanting. He could feel the eyes as they tied the horses outside the general store, some curious, some hard. Near the far end of the street, half hidden under the overhang of the land office, a man Ethan didn't recognize stood watching them with the particular stillness of someone paid to notice things. He filed it away without showing it. Inside, Mrs. Galvin behind the counter gave Ayanna a look that was not quite hostile and not quite welcome, the careful neutrality of a woman waiting to see which way the wind blew before she committed. When they came back out, a man named Doyle, large, slow, convinced of his own importance, was standing near the horses. "That your squaw, Carter?" he said. The word dropped into the street like a stone into still water. Ethan stopped. He felt Ayanna go still beside him. He turned to look at Doyle with the kind of calm that is not peaceful but is very, very certain. "No," he said. "She's the best ranch hand in the county, and you're going to step back from my horses." Doyle looked at him for a moment, measuring, and then stepped back. They loaded the supplies without another word. On the road home, the silence was different from the silences before it, warmer, more complicated. "You didn't have to do that," Ayanna said. "I know," Ethan said. "Why did you?" He looked at the long gold grass road ahead. "Because it was true," he said. "And because some things need to be said out loud." She looked at him for a moment, then turned back to the road. The man under the land office overhang was already gone, but he had seen everything. On a Sunday afternoon in the 6th week, Ethan found the satchel open on the kitchen table. He hadn't meant to look, but what he saw stopped him cold. Drawings, dozens of them, spread across the table in careful arrangement. Horses rendered in charcoal with an exactness that wasn't just skill but love. A hawk catching thermals over a canyon wall. The line of mountains east of the ranch at dusk. A hand, old and weathered, that he recognized after a moment as Charlie's. And one drawing of the ranch itself, the fence she had repaired, the well, the crooked barn roof, all of it laid down in clean, true lines. She was standing in the doorway when he looked up. He waited for her to be embarrassed. She wasn't. "Charlie taught me," she said. He said, "If you can draw something, you understand it." Ethan picked up the drawing of the ranch. He looked at it for a long time, at the way she had caught the exact lean of the old oak, the way the fence line curved where the ground dipped. She had seen everything. She had been paying attention to every detail of this place he had stopped seeing years ago. "You made it look," he started. "Like what?" she asked. He couldn't finish the sentence, because the word that came to mind was alive. "You're wasting your time mending fences," he said finally. "This is what you should be doing." "A person needs both," she said simply. "The fence keeps the cattle. The drawing keeps me." Ethan set the drawing back on the table carefully, not like a piece of paper but like something that mattered. "Could you draw me something?" he said. Anything you want. She looked at him for a moment, not surprised, but measuring something. Then she picked up her charcoal. I already know what it will be, she said. 3 days later, she gave him a drawing. It was the well, but the way she'd drawn it, it wasn't just a well. There was a bucket mid-pull, water catching the morning light in clean diagonal lines. There were Ethan's own hands on the rope, rendered from memory with a detail that startled him. And in the shallow water at the base of the stone walls, barely visible unless you looked closely, 2 small reflections, a man and a woman standing side by side. That evening, she wasn't at supper. He found her outside by the well, looking at the hills with her knees drawn up, her face doing something complicated. Ayanna. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, not crying, just the aftermath of it. She wiped them matter-of-factly. I need to tell you something, she said. Something my father didn't put in the letter, because he knew if he did, you wouldn't let me stay. Ethan sat across from her on the stone ledge of the well. She looked at the ground. I'm not just passing through. A man named Aldous Rowe, who claims land east of here, told me that the only way an Apache woman holds any claim in this part of New Mexico is if she is attached to a property as a working hand. He gave me until the end of the season to find a situation or be moved on. Moved on, Ethan said carefully. There's an agency 200 miles north. She said it without drama, which made it worse. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Why didn't your father tell me that? He asked. She looked up, and her voice was steady and sad and proud all at once. Because he wanted you to keep me here because you wanted to, not because you felt sorry for me. Ethan looked at the drawing still in his hands, the 2 small reflections in the water, and said nothing. But he didn't put it down. He didn't sleep that night. He lay in the dark thinking about all the locked rooms inside himself, the one with Margaret's name on the door, the one full of children that never were, the one he built around himself after the fever left and the silence came in. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, he admitted something to himself that he'd been refusing to look at for weeks. He was not ready for her to leave. It wasn't gratitude, though there was that. It wasn't obligation, though Charlie's letter had started it. It was something he didn't have a clean word for, something that had grown in the small daily exchanges, in the fire and the stars, in the careful way she looked at his land and saw something worth drawing. He was afraid of it, the way you're afraid of a river you know you need to cross. That afternoon he rode to town alone. He went to the county office and asked about Rowe's claim. The clerk confirmed it, then added quietly that the claim could be challenged if the woman in question was formally employed and housed on an established ranch with documentation. What kind of documentation? Ethan asked. A contract, or, the clerk paused, a marriage record. Ethan said nothing. He rode home slow, letting the horse find its own pace through the long grass. By the time he reached the gate, he knew what he was going to say. Not because of the legal situation, not because of Charlie, but because he had spent 7 years being a man who'd stopped wanting things, and he was slowly, terrifyingly, undeniably done with that. He found her at the fence. Ayanna, he said. She turned, and for the first time in 7 years, Ethan Carter said something he hadn't planned, hadn't rehearsed, and couldn't take back. I don't want you to go. She didn't answer right away. That was her way, not the silence of discomfort, but the silence of a person who respects words enough not to waste them. The wind came through the dry grass. A hawk turned overhead in a long, slow spiral. The afternoon held them both in its amber light. What does that mean? She asked, not suspicious, not hopeful, just careful. It means the ranch is better with you here. It means I sleep better knowing someone is on the other side of the wall. It means that drawing you gave me is the first thing I've looked at in years that made me feel like I was still part of the world. He looked at his hands. It means I've been alone for so long I almost forgot what it felt like to want something, and I don't want to forget again. She was quiet for a long moment. I told myself I wasn't going to let this happen, she said. Neither did I. I came here for work, for a season. That was all it was supposed to be. I don't know what I am to you, she said. I'm not your daughter. I don't know the word. Neither do I, he said honestly. But I think the word comes after the decision, not before. She looked at him then, really looked at him, the way she had looked at the ranch when she was drawing it, finding the true lines beneath the worn surface. My father said you were a good man, she said softly. He was too generous. No, she said. She turned back to the fence. I'll think about it, she said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. And for the first time in 7 years, he was afraid of something that wasn't loss. That was new. That was almost good. Roe came on a Thursday with 2 men he didn't bother to introduce and a piece of paper he held like a weapon. Ethan recognized one of them immediately, the man who had been standing under the land office overhang in Rio Blanco watching them load supplies. He'd been waiting for this. He just hadn't known when. Ethan was at the barn. Ayanna was at the well. Roe walked straight past Ethan toward her, which told Ethan everything he needed to know about the man. Season's end is Friday, Roe said. The arrangement with Carter is informal. It won't hold in county records. Ayanna. She's not going anywhere. Ethan said it before he'd even reached them. He hadn't moved fast. He didn't need to. He was simply, suddenly, there, standing between Roe and Ayanna, his voice carrying the flatness of a man who has made a decision and is done deliberating. Carter, this isn't your business. This is my property, Ethan said, and this woman is he paused for only a fraction of a second. Intended, which makes it very much my business. The word landed between them all. Ayanna, behind him, made no sound. Roe looked from Ethan to her and back. He was the kind of man who backed down when the math changed, and the math had just changed. I'll need documentation, Roe said, retreating into process. You'll have it, Ethan said. Roe left. His 2 men went with him. Ethan turned around. Ayanna was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read, not angry, not grateful, not quite amused, but something that held all 3 at its edges. You're intended, she said. I know I should have asked first, he said. Yes, she agreed. You should have. There was a long silence, then very quietly she said, ask me now. He asked her, not on one knee, that wasn't either of their styles, standing in the evening light with the ranch behind him and the long gold hills in every direction. I'm not an easy man, he said. I'm quiet and I'm set in my ways, and I've spent 7 years making peace with being alone. I don't know how to promise you everything, but I can promise you this. I will see you every day for the rest of my life. I will actually see you. And I think that's worth something. She looked at him for a long time. My father knew, she said finally. He knew this would happen. I think he always knew. Stubborn old man, Ethan said. Yes, she said. He was. She paused. So am I. I know. And I think, she stopped, took a breath, I think the answer is yes. They were married in Rio Blanco 6 weeks later in the small courthouse, with Mrs. Galvin as a witness, who it turned out had been quietly rooting for them since the day Ethan stood up to Doyle in the street. Small towns remember things. The ranch changed after that, not dramatically, but the fence was whole, the barn roof was finally fixed right, a garden appeared east of the house, planted in careful rows. The silence that had lived in every room was replaced slowly, beautifully, by the ordinary sounds of 2 people building something together. In the spring, she told him at the well. She said it simply, the way she said everything that mattered. He stood very still for a long moment, his hands on the rope, the morning light coming over the hills. Then he set down the bucket, crossed the distance between them, and held her, not dramatically, not with words, just held her in the way that a man holds something he was afraid he'd never have. In the quiet of that morning, on that small and stubborn ranch at the edge of the New Mexico desert, Ethan Carter finally came home. And somewhere in the long golden distance, or perhaps just in the deep place where a father's love outlasts his body, Charlie Running Horse smiled.